While searching for this fundamental structure of the vacuum in physics and mathematical equations, Haramein discovered geometrical knowledge in other curious places. Ancient text and traditions. Unknown to him at the time, many famous physicists found supporting data from historical manuscripts, including the founder of modern physical science, Isaac Newton. And German astronomer Johannes Kepler used geometrical concepts often found in ancient knowledge to elaborate the mechanics of our solar system. Energy events across the solar system frequently happen along or near the 19.47 meridian, which is the base of the inverted tetrahedron in the Earth's sphere. The pyramid system at Teotihuacan in Mexico lies on this meridian, as does one of the most active volcanoes on Earth. Kilauea in Hawaii has been erupting continuously for the last 19 years and shows no sign of stopping. The largest volcano in our solar system is located on Mars, and it too is located in this vicinity. The well-documented red spot on Jupiter, a large vortex-like storm larger than the Earth, is also stabilized near this critical 19.47 latitude.
As I studied more geometry, I came across Buckminster Fuller, that had done much work in describing complex geometry relative to our reality. And Buckminster Fuller came to conclude that the fundamental blueprint of the universe was what he called an isotropic vector metric, or a four-frequency isotropic vector metric. There is 20 tetrahedron in the four-frequency isotropic vector metric. 10 on the bottom, 6 in the middle, 3 on the third floor, and 1 on top. And it makes a larger tetrahedron when it's put together. What I was interested in was the negative space. I wanted to know what's in between the tetrahedrons. When you put tetrahedrons edge to edge or edge bounded, you get octahedrons in between. Octahedrons are pyramids base to base. Emphasis on the word pyramid. When I looked at the negative space, I found that there was another set of tetrahedron that was like the negative space. And those tetrahedrons in the middle were reversed and rotated 180 degrees. I didn't know what they were doing there. It was like there was asymmetry in the isotropic vector metric. With the word isotropic, you would expect no asymmetry. I was looking for perfect equilibrium, so this was not satisfactory to me. I had to figure out what these other tetrahedrons were doing there. I realized that one isotropic vector metric could not be alone. It had to be polarized. And so I stacked two on top of each other. However, now I had another problem. The two on top of each other didn't make a sphere, it made an egg. And the concept I had developed was that the tetrahedrons produce the sphere that divides the boundary from infinitely large to infinitely small. So I didn't know what to do. It was like an egg and a chicken problem. I thought about it for weeks, eventually realizing that I had to push one into the other. I didn't want to distort the geometry of the tetrahedron, but when I actually got the two so that they would produce a perfect sphere, I realized what these other negative space were for. In fact, the one metric was awaiting its better half. It was not actually complete until the reverse metric was inserted into it. And when it was, all of a sudden, these other spaces were there to accept the reverse tetrahedron. Like one tetrahedron male metric was waiting for its counterpart. It was remarkable. It was the polarities coming together to produce the perfect sphere. And I looked at what geometry was produced in the middle. No tetrahedrons were distorted. And the resulting geometry in the middle is a cube octahedron. Why is a cube octahedron important? Because Buckminster Fuller coined it the vector equilibrium. It's the only geometry in perfect equilibrium in all vectorial possibility. And that was exactly what I was looking for. The polarities coming together to produce singularity, to produce perfect equilibrium at its center. I thought, this must be the geometry of the vacuum.
Buckminster Fuller reasoned that if the force of a vector is its length, and two vectors are driven against each other in opposite directions, you will get equilibrium. But it will be unstable equilibrium because any other force in any other direction can break the balance. You could add two more vectors at 90 degrees from the initial point, but in that case, the edge vectors that contain the geometry would be longer than the vectors to the center, creating instability. Fuller realized that the edge vectors and the vectors to the center have to be the same distance. This creates a hexagon, or in 3 dimension, a cuboctahedron, or vector equilibrium. From this, Haramein concluded that this structure must be the geometry of the vacuum, since in perfect equilibrium, all the forces would cancel out and appear to us to be empty space.
However, I had found yet another issue. When I looked at the geometry carefully, the vector equilibrium in the middle was completely covered with tetrahedrons, but the edges of the metric still had open faces. I was looking for perfect symmetry. So I had to continue adding tetrahedrons to cover those faces. I had already 2 isotropic vector metric of 20 tetrahedron each. That made it 40. I had to add another 24 tetrahedron to cover all of the faces that were open faces on the edge of the metric. 20 plus 20 is 40, plus 24 brought me to 64 tetrahedron. This turned out to be a very significant number. Not only a number found in many ancient traditions, but a number that is found in many natural processes. The 64 tetrahedron grid kind of bloomed into a whole new understanding of the structure of the vacuum. It was exactly what I needed. It had an equilibrium at the center that was actually surrounded by another equilibrium. And you could visualize this structure growing in perfect fractal octaves from infinitely big to infinitely small. I had not only my polarities producing the equilibrium and singularity, but as it did, it produced fractal structures that could be scaled from infinitely big to infinitely small. I felt I had found something very profound. It was a true 3-dimensional fractal structure. And it grew in perfect octaves. I could see that this metric could actually be built in a completely different way as well. It could be built out of 8 star tetrahedron, each made out of 8 tetrahedron each. The 8 star tetrahedron coming together produce the 64 tetrahedron grid. 8 star tetrahedron are built by 8 tetrahedron, have their tetrahedron pointing out, radiating out. And when they come together, they produce the vector equilibrium in the middle, which is 8 tetrahedron pointing in. So I had now both of the side of the event horizon that produce the boundary condition. The radiative side and the contractive side of the event horizon. I thought, this is it. I found it. And I got very, very excited. I thought, this has all of the elements necessary for me to be able to map out and describe the structure of the vacuum. The key to the knowledge necessary to understand creation.
Now, with the structure of the vacuum realized, The next step was resolving how it moves. This required updating the theories that preceded Haramein. When Einstein wrote General Relativity, he described the structure of space-time as curving to produce a gravitational field. This was a change from Newton, who believed gravity was a force generated by the object itself.
Imagine a trampoline with a mass on it, like a big ball. And the trampoline is curved by that big ball. That trampoline surface has elasticity. And then imagine that another ball is put on the trampoline. That other ball would appear to be attracted to that first one due to the curvature of the surface of the trampoline. When Einstein wrote these equations, he didn't solve them. He just wrote the concept. He wrote the equation necessary to describe the concept. But the complexity of finding a solution was beyond what he wanted to do at the time. So he published General Relativity, and by an amazing set of circumstances, a gentleman called Karl Schwarzschild, a German physicist, found Einstein's paper. And he saw these equations and he thought, hey, I can solve this. And Karl Schwarzschild went on to finding the first solution to Einstein field equations. And that solution remains to this day as the Schwarzschild solution.
Unfortunately, months after Karl Schwarzschild solved Einstein's field equations, he died of an autoimmune disease, leaving the solution without any mention about the spin of the black hole. Spin and charge were introduced in the 1960s in what is commonly known as the Kerr-Newman solution. However, this theory did not account for the gyroscopic effect that Haramein knew needed to be accounted for.
If the gyroscopic effects are added, that means that the trampoline is not curving smoothly, but it is spinning as it curves. That space-time has a fundamental spin. Just like water going down the drain doesn't go down the drain straight, it spins as it goes down the drain. And that produces a fundamental torque. So torque and Coriolis effect had to be put back into Einstein field equations. Dr. Rauscher and I worked diligently for over a year and a half to make that happen. It gives a different picture of the structure of a black hole. Instead of a spherical, smooth surface, Coriolis effect were involved, and the surface was not a perfect sphere, but a torus. A torus is like a donut. It has a hole in the middle. And the result then was a dual torus structure. Because of Coriolis effect, one donut would be going in one direction and another donut would be going in the opposite direction. For every spin, there's a counterspin. Just like the weather patterns that we find on our planet, where hurricanes spin in one direction on the north hemisphere and spin in the other direction in the south hemisphere, and they meet at the equator, but go back to the poles and meet at the equator again. This animation shows the movement of a particle over the metrical space of the structure of space-time imbued with torque and Coriolis effect. All of a sudden, you can see that the information can move to the poles in towards the singularity and back out at the equator and back into the pole, and thus you get this feedback structure that could be found at the atomic level. For instance, this could be an electron and a positron, or at the stellar level where we see the plasma dynamics around the sun that produces the same dual torus dynamic, or at the galactic level. What's in the middle of a torus? What's in the middle of a donut? The hole, right, is space, the vacuum. And this is why the vacuum connects all things, because the vacuum divides not with the complete boundary of a sphere, but with a torus in which the vacuum is at the center of every object, where you'd expect singularity, infinite density of a black hole, but instead it's the vacuum which is infinitely dense, and that connects all things. It explained many different things, including the way magnetic fields are produced and where the origin of spin was. Not only is spin inherent to the structure of space itself, but it is prevalent at all levels if the structure of the vacuum acts like a fluid, acts like water going down the drain. We know that the electron and the positron exchange and disappear and reappear and disappear and reappear. It seems to exchange across the vacuum. That is, the vacuum fluctuates, produces an electron and fluctuates, and then the electron disappears. The electron carries the information from the material world to the vacuum, informs the vacuum, and then the vacuum informs back the material world when the electron comes back out. And so we actually are constantly appearing and disappearing at a very rapid rate, at the speed of light. Who are you when you're the vacuum? And what are you saying to the rest of the universe when you're informing the vacuum? From this model of the double torus, we started to have an understanding of why consciousness emerges. Consciousness demands feedback. In order for you to be self-aware, you must know that you exist. Thus, it demands feedback. This structure of the double torus allows for this feedback between what's coming from the outside that's going back to the inside, informing the vacuum, coming back out the outside, and as it comes back out the outside, the vacuum informs us of the result of the information present in the vacuum. It is an exchange between your internal understanding and experience of the universe and the relationship of all the understandings put together in the vacuums affecting yours. So you're not creating your reality, you are co-creating your reality with everybody else.